What's up guys, Perry from Rockville here, and today I'm going to show you how to set up the ATV420 4-channel UTV and motorcycle Bluetooth amplifier. As you can see, it comes with the amplifier itself with all of the wires, inputs, and outputs needed to connect it to any speakers or head unit, 4 screws to mount the amplifier, an extra fuse, a cover removal tool, and adapters for a high voltage radio. So let's take a look at all of the wires, inputs, and outputs. The red cable here is the power cable that runs to the 12 volt of your battery to power your amp. The black cable is the ground cable that runs to the ground terminal of your battery. Then you have the blue wire that acts as the accessory, remote, and ignition wire. You'll want to run this wire to the ignition of your vehicle so that the amplifier powers on as soon as the vehicle does. We also have all of our speaker wire to connect some speakers right to the amp. You have the white wires here that act as the channel 1 left speaker output, with the plain wire as the positive and the one with the black stripe as the negative. Next to that, you have the gray wires that act as the channel 2 right speaker output, with the plain one as the positive and the one with the black stripe as the negative. Next, you have the green wire for the channel 3 left speaker output, with the plain wire as the positive and the one with the black stripe as the negative. And lastly, you have the purple wire for the channel 4 right speaker output, with the plain as the positive and the one with the black stripe as the negative. So to connect your speakers to any of these wires, you're just going to need some speaker leads. So you're going to take one end and connect the red wire into the positive wire of whichever channel you're using, and connect the negative to the negative. Then take the other end of the lead and plug that into the positive and negative terminals of your speaker, and repeat this process for however many channels you want to use. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that each channel on the amplifier is 2 ohms stable. So if you have the amplifier set up in the 4-channel mode, you can set up 2 4-ohm speakers per channel. You can also have 1 2-ohm speaker per channel, or you can bridge 2 channels together to run a subwoofer at 4 ohms. We also have the RCA inputs for channels 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 to connect a head unit or receiver to the amplifier. So now let's move on to the controls of the amplifier. To get to these controls, you're just going to unscrew all of these screws on the top of the amp. Then you're going to use the top of the cover removal tool to remove the cover. Now the controls are the exact same for each set of channels, and they allow you to really fine-tune the amp for your setup. So you have the frequency knob from 32 to 320 Hertz, which works in conjunction with the crossover switch right next to it. So you can either set this to the off position, which means the crossover will bypass and play the full frequency range out of the speakers. The high pass filter, which means it's only going to play the frequencies above wherever you set your frequency knob. So for example, if I set this knob to 200 Hertz, it's only going to play everything from 200 Hertz and above. This is good to use if you already have a dedicated subwoofer in your setup, or if you're using the amp to play small to mid-range drivers. Then you have the low pass filter mode, where it will play everything below where you set your frequency knob. So if I set the frequency knob to 150 Hertz, it's only going to play everything from 150 Hertz and below. This would be good to use if you have your subwoofer set up to these channels, so it's playing all of the low end. Each channel also has a level knob to set the gain for each channel, as well as the input voltage switch. You'll want to have this switch set to low if you're using RCA cables to connect your head unit or receiver to the amp, and you'll only want to have this switch set to high if you're using the high level adapters to get signal directly from speaker wire with your stock head unit or receiver. Now you can use all of these different crossover settings to mix and match your speakers on each of these channels. For example, you can have 4 full range speakers set up to channels 1 and 2, and set the crossover to the high pass filter mode to filter out some of the low end frequencies. Then you can bridge channels 3 and 4 together to use a subwoofer, and set the crossover to low pass filter mode so it's really targeting the low end. Whatever you decide really just depends on your setup. On the top, we also have the input mode, where we can set the amplifier to 2-channel or 4-channel mode depending on the type of head unit we use. Now we can also set up a head unit to our amplifier to play music. To do that, you're going to need a receiver that has RCA outputs and a couple of RCA cables. Now the receiver currently isn't powered, but we're just going to show you the connections so you know what to do with an actual receiver. Now if your receiver has 2 sets of RCA outputs for your front and rear speakers, you're able to use all 4 channels on your amplifier. So for this setup, you can set your amplifier to the 4-channel input mode. If your receiver only has 1 set of RCA outputs, you would only want to plug your receiver into channels 1 and 2 and set the amplifier to the 2-channel input mode so that everything is coming out of all of your speakers. So to connect your receiver receiver to the amplifier, you're gonna need 2 RCA cables. You're gonna take one end of both cables and plug it into the RCA output on your receiver. Then you're gonna take the other ends of your cables and plug it into the RCA inputs for channels 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You'll also want to be aware of the input voltage switch on each channel. This will allow you to set the voltage sensitivity to match your input source. So if you're using a head unit with pre-outs like the one we have here, you'll want to flip these switches to low. Or if you want to set your amplifier to a factory or stock radio, you'll want to set the switch to high and use the included adapters to connect your radio to your amplifier. What's also really cool is that you can connect your smart device to the amp through Bluetooth to play some music. To do that, I'm going to go into the Bluetooth settings, search for the device that reads ATV420, and click on it to pair. So now I've got all of my speakers connected for a 4-channel setup, so let's go ahead and hear how it sounds. So if your smartphone or tablet isn't connected to the amp through Bluetooth, the amp will automatically be looking for the RCA connection to play some music. So hopefully this showed you guys how easy it is to set up your ATV420, UTV, and motorcycle Bluetooth amplifier. But of course, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to our customer support team through phone or email. As always, I'm Perry from Rockville, and we'll see you guys next time.